Good morning, everybody. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Happy Friday. Got an early start, been going for a few hours already. Been a few days since the city council meeting, and I wanted to go ahead and kind of do a little bit of a review of some of the things that sort of had occurred there. Um, let me see here. Sorry it's taken a few days. It's been kind of busy, been out of town for a little over a week prior to this week. And so between work and trying to catch up with things, have been a little bit off as far as that goes. Um, see if I can share some things here. See if I can share the agenda. Yeah, I'm sharing the agenda. Okay. And so we'll kind of go through the agenda. I have a couple pages of notes here, and we'll try to be pretty succinct and answer some questions people kind of had. So we had our city council meeting on July 22nd at 6 p.m. at City Hall, reasonably attended. We had approval of the consent agenda, which is basically a way to kind of approve all the minutes from tourism, planning and zoning, all the committee work that's sort of going on prior to this meeting, as well as the approval of purchase orders to a tune of $355,000 from general government. And so some things that just sort of jumped out to me just for you guys to be aware of. Within that $355,000, there was $31,000 to admin, $39,000 allocated to street payments, street work, $23,000 to aquatic center, and $17,000 to the rec center, and $5K to tourism and associated allocations. And those general government categories exist from basically the 4th of July through July 17th. We have our meetings in 2-week increments. And so all those PO orders and associated things with expense are associated with the 2 weeks prior to the meeting. And so that was sort of listed there. Of note, just because it was worth noting, we actually had a positive month relevant to sales tax. Particularly, it was a little bit down in just slightly compared to prior month, but compared to prior year, we were about 25K above where we were in 2024 for July. And remember that sales tax really is a reflection of 4 to 6 weeks prior. It's not like immediately in July. And so from that perspective, it's 4 to 6 weeks prior, the way that the state sort of reports that money back to us. So we had $675,000 in sales tax revenue generated. Again, $651,000 in 2024. So I think that's a little bit better from that perspective. And we can do a breakdown of financial statements when they finally come out for July. In June even. I haven't specifically seen those at this point. We didn't have any board appointments. Rebecca Brenley came and she got herself on the agenda to discuss, obviously, some of the water issues that have been going on through town. And a lot of her thing was in regards to transparency, was in regards to updates from the city on what's sort of going on. Grant writing was a big part of her sort of thought process, and wanted to know what grants we had sort of applied for and not applied for. One thing I think Joe does a pretty good job at is sort of addressing the audience, for lack of a different term. I've seen city council things where maybe the city manager is just speaking directly to the city council and back and vice versa, and maybe not much interchange directly with the audience, if you will. And he's definitely pretty good at actually directing commentary back to people in regards to questions there during a city council meeting with things that are on the agenda. And he had sort of answered some things she had in regard to grants, sort of mentioning, she was talking about some things like, REAP grants, USDA grants, et cetera, et cetera. And he had sort of gone through, we're applying for REAP grants for the water plant. However, they have a timeline with like one grant for 50,000, another one for 100, another one for 400. And so, we aren't applying for the 50 and the 100, we're applying for the $400,000 grant. And that if you earn, say, the 50, you're not eligible for the 400. And with some of the things that we have going on with engineers and DEQ, that we would want to apply for a much larger sum. And obviously there's other grants that we're working on, and people always have questions about that, listings of things. And those are things that Joe can kind of provide in that way. Additionally, there was questions on USDA grants, and you have to be sort of SOTA qualified. And that's basically the Southern Oklahoma. It's sort of like our association, if you will, for development. And we're a part of that with Pauls Valley. And so there was good discussion on that, and I think that she had some of her questions answered. I know that her and Joe had talked a little bit after the meeting, and so I wasn't a part of that conversation. But again, good conversation is still going on. Joe wasn't able to be at Coffee with Joe, so I know there might be more questions that came from that. He was at a city manager state meeting Wednesday through Friday this week, but we will return next Wednesday, so I'm sure there'll be more questions in regards to that. He also gave a little bit of an update in regards to some of the Brownwater issues. And I know it's a little bit asynchronous from even like one street to the next, one house to the next on the same street. And that we are still doing daily testing, this peripheral testing. I know that after Coffee with Joe last week, some people went over and did a tour, and he had mentioned how there were some representatives from the state that were there, and they were able to see some of the testing that was going on. I think that was appreciated by folks. He was talking about how they were using a chemical by the name of Oxy to address the manganese and iron that's in the system from runoff. I've seen people talk about, groundwater systems, limitation of runoff in relation to that. We have more of a lake versus groundwater internally. And so all of the rain that we've gotten, I think we get 40 some odd inches a year. We're currently at almost 90. So the runoff from that into the lake is creating some of the issues, obviously, with the brown water with manganese and iron. Oxy was a chemical that was being used, not as successfully as we'd like. And so based upon DEQ and 3 chemical engineers, I want to think I'm saying this correctly, permanganate, I think, is what was moved to, if I'm saying that correctly. And so that is now currently being used and directly injected into the system where the water intake comes into the plant. And so one issue that is associated with that, I think some people have seen some improvements in that, and then it would sort of fall off, or certain houses are getting it gets better, it goes back. The pump that we're using to push the permanganate is not able to push as much as we'd like. And so from the identification of that, it was immediately moved to get a larger pump that's on order. It was supposed to potentially be in on Wednesday. I'm not sure if that has occurred yet, but with that, more doses of the permanganate will go into the system, and that should help address some of those issues. I think some of the things that are going on too, from house to house within even certain blocks. I know people here in town, they're like, 2 blocks from me here, my water's clear, their water is not at times. And I haven't experienced as much of it with me here, but I think, we've done some renovations here. We don't really have any steel pipes, copper pipes. It's all PEX or PVC. And so from that perspective, I think that makes a difference. Sedimentation, and again, I'm not a water expert, but just making some assumptions. Sedimentation, settling at the bottom pipes, I think, as we're actively treating at the water plant, I think that's disrupting some of those things that are in those pipes for folks. And so in my guess, folks that have older pipes are probably going to experience a little bit more of the brown water, not assuming any kind of fault, but as an explanation for, I think, what's going on to some degree. And Joe had sort of spoke to that as well. And so hopefully with the increase in the permanganate, that will help that process as well. And so that was basically what we had kind of covered, after Rebecca had sort of spoken, and we all appreciate her coming and sharing her passion for it, willingness to help the city and seeking out grants and being a force for trying to move some things forward with the water plant and distribution. We talked about under 8, consideration of the code enforcement bond schedule update. And so when we looked at that, I know me and Jonathan both and some other council members had some questions in regards to, okay, these are the new rates. What were they prior, and what was the rate of increase? And there were some things in regards to, discussion of those things in regards to, what were those numbers? And we felt like we wanted to have that information before we voted on it, so it was tabled. We wanted to know what kind of difference was it. There was some discussion that there was some comparison rates in regards to other cities and municipalities, but we would just like to see, where were we at and where did we go to? And so they're going to get that information to us, and then it'll come up at another city council meeting. So there's no action taken. There was a standard, approval of distributing escrow account funds from OMAG to the workers' compensation policy, just a standard thing for workers' compensation for the city. So that was approved. There was an address by Mark Norman in regards to manufactured homes within the city of Palms Valley. And he sort of highlighted than individual. And there's different types of manufactured homes. There are those that we consider more mobile, and there are certain type 1, 2, 3 that are based on size. And then there are homes that are built somewhere and then put on a stable foundation that are considered a little bit differently. And currently you can put those types of homes in the city of Pauls Valley. However, some of the more mobile homes, if you will, are not allowed to be put inside city limits, although our ordinances certainly reflect, and the ideology was that you want to be able to put them into specific areas, right? So if there was a designated area that was identified, you could have a grouping of these types of homes. And you see them around the outskirts of town as far as that goes. And there was some conflicting language. It was when the ordinance that Mark felt like needed to be addressed in regards to that. And so council's recommendation was to have planning and zoning look at this. It seems like an appropriate venue for that to be. I think some of the city council members were talking about being at the next planning and zoning meeting to sort of, be a part of that process as well. I think that's important. And I had sort of, so we sort of tabled there was no action from that, but I had sort of mentioned to Mark, as well as some other council members that, kind of feel like, okay, if we designate an area or a zone, we definitely want public input and comment in regards to where that is, right? We don't want the city to just determine, hey, we're going to put this housing over here. It affects certain residents in a certain neighborhood without actually seeking feedback on that. So be looking for more information to come from that. With that being said, definitely affordable housing is an issue in Pauls Valley. My understanding is that 50% of most of the homes in Pauls Valley are rentals, which was sort of surprising to me. I heard that statistic. But I think within that, I think affordable housing is a thing everywhere. It is certainly here in Pauls Valley, and we want to be able to meet the needs of the residents that have existing housing, the effects on them, as well as providing affordable housing for the residents of Pauls Valley. So more things to come from there, but worth mentioning. Number 11, consideration of approving a request from the fire department for a road closure for Rock the Block. It's basically going to be like a community event on August 16th over by the fire station. So there's a few streets from Walnut to Charles to McClure that'll be blocked for a certain period of time for both setup and takedowns. It'll be most of that day. So you want a certain awareness with regards to that. And as you look at that, I want to say proposed was like 12 noon to about 10 p.m. Those roads will be blocked around the fire station. So you want to have a certain awareness for that. But it's just going to be a community event for fun with the fire department and for kids and families. And so I think that's going to be a great thing. And so that was approved without any kind of issue. Appreciate the fire department doing that. There was consideration of executive session. So we did go into executive session. And while I cannot specifically speak to any of the issues that were within the executive session, when we came out of executive session, we returned to open session. And then there was a motion to approve the union contract from the fire department. And that was unanimously done by city council. And so we have that one done both for the police and now the fire with regards to their unions as far as the approval of the contracts. And then I'm looking through here. I think that pretty well covered everything as far as that goes. There were some city manager comments, city pool party for staff on August 1st, which is kind of a cool thing. I'm assuming that's going to be at the water park. Looking through here. He actually had some good news. We had talked about how Senator Cole had kind of helped get us on a list, $6.286 million renovations and funds for infrastructure for the Old City Lake Spillway that people have seen videos and commentary on, and so a little bit of an update on that. So it's attached to an actual bill that's moving through legislative sessions within the state of Oklahoma. And so the bill had actually moved into an appropriation stage. So it's still sort of alive. Now, whether it actually gets moved to being a funded entity, but we are on a list for that. And so that is a good thing from that perspective. And so you definitely want to follow that. I'll try to find a bill number for that so people can follow it. But again, we're still alive with regards to some funding in regards to addressing the spillway. Again, not guaranteed, but it's something that we can kind of look at. As we kind of go into like Pauls Valley Municipal Authority, I won't specifically switch over to that, or maybe I will. see here. I'm going to switch in that share, and I'm back, and I'll share. Let's see if I can share the other one. I think this is, yeah, Paul's Municipal Authority. So a little bit of those are much briefer. I mean, the PVMA is obviously utility stuff, water plant, wastewater sanitation. And so basically there was the approval of the PO orders for that period of July 4th through the 17th to the tune of $193,000. Looking at some of those things, water plant took about 31K, sanitation 68, wastewater 9, water distribution 8. We were to move $4,500 to long-term reserve, $29,000 in admin. And so that was approved. I mean, just the PO orders and expenses as far as that goes. We talked, a little bit, obviously, a lot about the water stuff under Rebecca's address to the city. So I don't need to necessarily rehash that. I don't have any other updates on water plant specifically. I am kind of curious. I mean, I'm not experiencing it here at my residence, but I'm curious, how other folks are sort of experiencing it. I mean, I'm hearing from people, so that's certainly one thing, but it's not consistent or a numerical thing across the city. And so just kind of curious, and you might comment when I post this on my page, your experience and kind of where things are. I had gone in and spoken a little bit, water plant related issues for me this week. I had spoken to somebody with a lot of water plant experience, almost 20, 25 or 30 years, with a couple of city residents earlier this week for a couple of hours. And so there were some good discussions that had sort of gone on. And her big thing, in regards to the safety of the water was that, hey, DEQ is testing daily. We have so many state entities involved and engineers and everything else. While the quality and clarity of the water may not be where we always want it to be, and that's certainly an important thing, that the safety of the water as a secondary, thing is, or a primary thing even, is okay. Because if there was unsafe water, that DEQ would 100% shut down the plant. And how she had seen that through her works both regionally and nationally with E. coli and other things in other municipalities. And so while we have issues, and we're certainly addressing those, and I've heard Joe speak to, since he's been here, the 6 or 7 months, that they spent almost $1 million through the water plant. So there's investment being made. I know the engineers are working on those things with DEQ. With some of the Brownwater stuff, it got recalibrated, their approach. And so we were thinking maybe by August 1st, we'd have a little bit of an update on what they're wanting us to do. I think it may take a little bit longer with some of the things that are kind of going on, more of a long-term plan. And so there is discussion about retrofitting and doing some different things at the water plant to address some of the issues that we sort of have going on. And so there will definitely be more information in regards to it. And so be on the lookout for that. And hopefully everyone's water is improving with the increased pressure of the injector pushing the permanganate into the system to address the manganese and iron. And there was sort of this ideology. I mean, when that chemical goes in, if you overdose it, the water may not be brown, it may be pink. At least then, I mean, that's not great either, but you would know that you've addressed, most all of the manganese and iron. So hopefully, I don't know if we'll see that at all necessarily, but hopefully the clarity of everyone's water is improving. I think that's all I specifically have at this point. I'll get an update from Joe. He's obviously been out, like I said, Wednesday through Friday. I'll have some more discussions with him, I'm sure, next week that I can share with you guys. And then I hope everyone has a really, really great Friday. I'm getting ready to head off to East Moore, go do some more work stuff. But wanted to definitely get this done just because it's been a couple days since city council meeting. I know people like to hear kind of what's going on. Still an advocate for the live stream, as a replacement to what I'm doing here, so people can kind of see what's actually said at city meetings and agendas and all that sort of thing. So with that being said, I hope you guys have a great weekend or blessed, and have a good weekend. Talk soon.